You know that feeling when someone says, once I hit $100,000 a year, I'll finally be good? Yeah, this guy used to think the exact same thing. For the longest time, $100,000 wasn't just a number to this guy. It was the number, the goal, the point where life would finally feel stable. No more stressing over bills, no more second guessing every purchase, no more checking the bank account before going out, just breathing room. And to be fair, this guy worked for it. Late nights, learning better skills, making smarter decisions. Slowly, the income started growing. From $40,000 to $60,000, then $80,000. And eventually right around that $100,000 mark. And for a moment, it genuinely felt like everything had clicked into place. Like all the effort had finally paid off. And this was the version of life this guy had been chasing all along. But that feeling didn't last. Not because something went terribly wrong, but because something subtle started to shift. The apartment got a little nicer, then a little more expensive. The car upgrade made sense at the time. Eating out became normal instead of occasional. Small subscriptions, random upgrades, things that once felt optional slowly became part of the routine. And that's the tricky part. Nothing this guy did felt irresponsible. It all felt deserved. I'm earning more now, this guy told himself. I can afford this. I've worked hard for this. And none of that is wrong. In fact, that's how most people think. But what this guy didn't notice was that life was upgrading at the same speed as income. Every time more money came in, something else expanded to match it. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, almost like a leak you don't notice until the damage is already done. At first, these changes felt exciting. A better place, a better lifestyle. It felt like progress. And in many ways, it was. But progress came with a cost that wasn't obvious in the beginning. The monthly expenses started stacking up. Fixed costs increased. The margin for error started shrinking. And even though this guy was earning more than ever, there was less flexibility than expected. Until one day, something felt off again. Not broke, but not comfortable either. Not struggling, but definitely not relaxed. And that's when it hits. This guy is making more money than ever before, but somehow it still doesn't feel like enough. Now, the worry isn't about paying bills, it's about maintaining everything. Keeping up with rent, the lifestyle, the expectations that quietly built up over time. It's a different kind of pressure, but it's still pressure. And the weirdest part is that the goalpost has moved. $100,000 used to feel like freedom, but now it feels like maybe just the starting point. Now it's maybe $150,000 would feel better, or if I hit $200,000, then things will settle. And that cycle doesn't really end, because the issue was never just the number. It was the belief that a number alone would fix everything. At some point, this guy starts noticing a pattern. Back when income was lower, there were clear limits. Decisions had to be thought through. Do I really need this? Was a normal question, and every purchase had some level of friction. And that friction created awareness. But as income grew, those questions slowly disappeared. Spending became easier to justify. And when everything feels justified, nothing really gets questioned anymore. That's how $100,000 slowly stops feeling like a lot. Not because it isn't, but because the lifestyle around it keeps expanding until it feels average again. It becomes the new baseline, the new normal. And once something becomes normal, it no longer feels special. And that's where things get uncomfortable. Because now the stress isn't about survival, it's about maintenance. It's no longer, can I afford this? But can I keep this life going? And that question hits differently because now it's tied to identity. This guy isn't just earning money anymore. This guy is trying to sustain a version of life that feels normal now, a version that others can see, a version that feels like progress. And going backwards, that feels like failure. Even if it actually makes more sense financially. Even if it would create more peace, the idea of downgrading, cutting back, or simplifying starts to feel like losing, not adjusting. So instead, this guy keeps pushing forward. Earn more, upgrade more, repeat. Maybe the next raise will fix it. Maybe a better opportunity will finally create that breathing room that was expected at $100,000. But every time income increases, life seems to expand right along with it. The gap never really appears. And eventually there's a pause, a quiet moment where this guy starts questioning things more deeply. What actually matters here? Which of these expenses are real needs, and which ones just became habits over time? Did these upgrades truly improve life in a meaningful way? Or did they just make everything more expensive and harder to maintain? And that's when something important shifts. Because for the first time, this guy realized that enough was never clearly defined. It was always this vague idea somewhere in the future, a moving target. And if you don't define enough, it just keeps moving further away. That's why $100,000 doesn't feel like enough anymore. Not because it isn't enough, but because the target itself was never fixed. There was no clear line that said, this is where you can stop and feel okay. Without that line, the chase never really ends. So instead of chasing a bigger number again, this guy starts focusing on something different, control. Not in a restrictive or limiting way, but in a more intentional, aware way. Paying attention again. Questioning things that were running on autopilot. Looking at spending with fresh eyes instead of assumptions. And slowly, the pressure starts moving. Not instantly, not perfectly, but noticeably. Because now it's not just about how much money is coming in, it's about how it's being used and whether it actually supports the kind of life this guy wants. This guy stops assuming that the next raise will solve everything because now it's clear that without control, more money just creates a bigger version of the same problem. A more expensive version of the same stress. And that realization changes everything. The question is no longer, how can I earn more, but how can I use what I already have better? How can I create space without constantly needing to increase income? How can I define a version of life that feels stable without always upgrading it? And weirdly enough, that's when things start to feel more stable. Not because the number changed, but because the mindset did. Because now there's clarity, now there's intention, now there's a definition of what actually matters and what doesn't. And once that clarity is in place, the pressure that once felt constant starts to fade. In the end, the truth is simple. $100,000 isn't the problem. The real problem is believing that any number by itself will fix a system that was never clearly defined. This guy didn't fail. This guy just followed the same path most people follow, thinking that more income automatically means less stress. But now it's different. Now this guy understands that money doesn't define enough. It doesn't fix unclear priorities. And it doesn't stop lifestyle inflation on its own. That part is a decision. And once this guy finally defines what enough actually means, that's when everything changes. Now that's when $100,000 stops feeling small and starts feeling like something that can actually work. Not because it's bigger, but because it's finally being used with purpose.